Today I'm making a commitment to share the gifts that I've been cultivating for a long time because I think that all of the fear that is permeating the world and all of the death that is elicited by COVID-19, the coronavirus, is really a mirror of the unhealed places that we must meet with more discernment, mindfulness, and kindness. And these range from such a multiplicity of places of origin. So I suppose I'll start from the proverbial beginning of this particular chapter. And I will weave into this narrative my own thoughts and perceptions on that which I am witness to the unfolding of in these moments. So, the coronavirus, COVID-19, theoretically began in Wuhan wet markets of China, as Peter Singer has noted. Wet markets are essentially spaces wherein, in open market contexts, animals are traded as though they're property, and they are slaughtered often on the spot in order to make their sale a more smooth transaction. So it's in this space of darkness wherein this particular virus began to mutate so as to hop into a human biological context in a way that would infect us and cause great harm to the respiratory tract and to the lungs through pneumonia and other fibrosis-like symptoms that obscure breathing. So the pangolin, for example, is one of the primary animals that has been targeted by some epidemiologists as the likeliest source of the coronavirus. The pangolin is a mammal which is scaled in nature, and it is the most widely trafficked animal globally. It is sold for its scales, which some traditional Chinese practices have conceived of as being medicinal in nature. It's hard for me to talk about this because, on the one hand, as an individual who is largely vegan and who hasn't consumed meat in quite a few years, I have a lot of empathy and compassion for our more than human brethren, our kin on this planet, whom we have treated as though they're non-sentient property for a very long time. The lack of reverence for the fact that they too, like us, they suffer. And I don't think that because the disease, the coronavirus, likely transferred from, for example, the pangolin to us, that this in any way entails that we deserve it. I don't believe that that's true, and I don't believe that these environmental ethical narratives which trace this terrible disease back to Wuhan wet markets in any way justifies any racist rhetoric that marks a particular culture as being responsible for this global epidemic. After all, in the United States, individuals who look like me, who are white people, also engage in factory farming and the systemic slaughtering of pigs and cows and chickens and other creatures who are sentient, who feel, who love, who grieve. No, this epidemic is a mirror for us as a collective. Just through a rather salient primary character and cast member, the pangolin, insofar as, again, they are on the verge of extirpation, of extinction, due to the widely trafficked nature of their distribution throughout these wet markets in Wuhan. This virus is a sign to us, I believe, that we are connected causally to the entire global network of which we are part and parcel. Pangolins are not our property, they are our kin, and when we treat any member of our species or any member of another species with a lack of reverence as though they are chattel, Even that term chattel implies that cows are property. They are not property, they are living beings. When we treat any portion of the planet in this way, through factory farming, through mass mining, through the pollution of our waterways, through the suppression of our indigenous populations and people who have the relevant skill set in order to conserve biodiversity, when we engage in these mindless activities, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. This is the world mirroring back to us the fact that we are all one planetary organism that is dreaming itself into separateness through these individuated personalities and forms, one of which I am currently speaking through at this moment. I, Kimberly Dill, am but one person, yes, an individual, a personality who has a particular history, but I too am made up of matter that is descendant from the terrestrial landscape on which we are situated collectively. We are family. Whether we want to be or not, we are bound together. We are in this together for good, for bad, for sickness, for health. The suffering of one portion of our population, whether it be as small as a pangolin or as large as the global Homo sapiens community who is struggling and fighting and fearful in face of this virus. What happens to one portion of us inevitably happens to all of us. So I hope that this sickness will enlighten us, will serve as a great awakening, so that we can begin to reconceive of how we have built our world, so that it is more equitable, and so that we see ourselves as being less separate from the rest of the more than human natural system, of which we are, my friends, only but one part. We are only one part. But in our disillusionment, in our forgetting, in the great dreaming that has been terrible over the course of the past few thousand years, we have imagined that we are somehow singular in terms of superiority on the face of our planet Earth. We have imagined that we have the right to treat any species and any portion of our landscape as though it is our property. My friends, it is not. We are in a global pandemic of immaturity, of egotistical thinking, which is more akin to the differentiation that happens when a toddler begins to formulate a separate id. We are. But we have a choice, as everyone does. Everyone has a choice, a coming of age, wherein they assume responsibility for the way in which they show up on this planet, wherein they assume responsibility for the gifts that they cultivate and the way that those gifts are shared with our world. So please identify your gifts and begin to share them. We must divest. We must divest from this us versus them mentality. We must divest from treating any human person or any more than human person, whether it be a forested landscape or a pangolin, as though it is ours to do with it what we will. That is rape, my friends. That is the rape of the land. And the consequence of that rape is our own perishing in peril, because we cut off our nose to spite our face when we treat our world in that way. Illness, en masse, spreading as it is from country to country across this landscape, is the symptom of that truth. It is the fact of the matter. Whether you believe that there is a heaven after this planetary landscape concludes for you in your brief human life, or whether you believe that this is all that there is, it shouldn't matter, because suffering, wherever it occurs, is that which we ought to eradicate, not any enemy. And the only way to do this is through having compassion. Compassion for the fear that arises in ourselves during these dark moments. Compassion for the individuals who gave rise to wet markets in Wuhan, who have enslaved the pangolin and sold it for its scales. compassion for the individuals who own factory farms wherein pigs who are extraordinarily intelligent are also treated in this manner, compassion for leaders who don't know what to do in these moments because they do not know. They are ignorant. This is the essence of what the Buddha argued for Siddhartha Gautama and all of his many disciples whom he gave birth to, when he said compassion and equanimity. These are the keys to enlightenment, to freeing ourselves of the burden of suffering on our planetary landscape right now and throughout all eternity. Compassion is the core, is the key of what Jesus Christ and the Christian traditions articulated when he says, "Forgive them," as he hangs on the cross, having been put there by the individuals of whom he speaks. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Fear is not the answer. Anger is not the answer. And staying stuck in grief, as I have a tendency to do, is not the answer. The answer is discernment, wisdom, washing one's hands, paired with compassion for self, and a reluctance, a protest against fear and all of its various manifestations: racism, sexism, targeting the pangolin as though it's responsible for the suffering of our species. No, none of this will do. To quote a new colleague of mine, if I may be so bold, Justin Clardy, who will soon join us here at my university as a professor of philosophy, we must be tender in these times, tender to those amongst us who are suffering disproportionately as a result of this pandemic which we have brought upon ourselves as a collective. We must care and reach out to our neighbors who are immunosuppressed, who have weakened immune systems due perhaps to age, perhaps they're elderly, or due to some other condition of which perhaps we're not even sensitive to. How can we be of service to each other during these times of fear, of darkness, of illness? How can we be more compassionate? How can we be brave? How can we start to see ourselves as ever part of one global family that has been at war with itself? This and all wars are all civil. They're all amongst kin. It's time to heal this, my friends. I love you, and I hold you collectively in my thoughts every day as I sing for the healing of this world, as I meditate for the healing of this world, as I write and study and teach, all in the name of this world's safety and healing, each and every one. Be brave. All is well. Do not fear your fear. Do not fear your grief. Do not fear your anger, but meet it as a friend and transmute it through loving kindness and awareness. I know not what I do when I fear. They know not what they do when they anger. But now the lesson has been taught and our test has arisen. Let's meet it. I have faith that together we can pass this, and a new world through the dark portal of which we currently find ourselves facing will birth. Despite the blood and the horror and the trauma, it will birth a new world, and life will begin anew. Goodbye.